Welcome to Evil Live, the live media commentary show that answers the question, what exactly is the World of Darkness? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing World of Darkness Storyteller Vault Style Guide. Admittedly, this is a weird thing to review. It's not exactly, well, it's literally not a novel, and it's not a source book either. And really all it is are guidelines for writers to create their own content to then sell on Storytellers Vault or Drive-Thru RPG or, websites like those. I mean, that's really the core of what it is. And so I guess that just begs the question, why did I read it and why am I reviewing it? Well, I was first introduced to Vampire the Masquerade by some really good friends back in the early 90s or mid 90s or something like that. And they were gothic and they actually thought they were vampires and stuff. And so I sort of cut my teeth on awareness about it then. That being said, I kind of fell in love with the concept of the World of Darkness. So as soon as Vampire the Masquerade was massively popular, and it sort of reinvented the idea of role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, because not just did it have this really sort of great mechanic at its base, its focus was on role-playing. And, Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire came out around that time, and that just sort of hyped up everything, got everyone into Anne Rice, and then that sort of made this weird echo chamber feedback loop thing between Vampire the Masquerade and Anne Rice's works. And because it was a cultural phenomenon, it just sort of made Vampire and White Wolf as a publisher incredibly popular. They, instead of focusing on like race and class, everyone was a vampire and you belonged to a different family or tribe or clan. And each clan sort of acted as if it was a class of some sort. All this is to say that as the product line expanded from White Wolf, including more titles like Werewolf the Apocalypse, Maids the Ascension, Wraith the Oblivion, and etc., as that started exploding, they decided to sort of wrap it all inside the same universe. That sort of World of Darkness was literally called, that universe was called World of Darkness. And so while the entire product line was led by Vampire the Masquerade, and they had a bunch of, fiction and game books that were released for just, it was a ton of content. That was really the flagship, and everything else was sort of secondary and tertiary to it. So then I sort of stepped away and, sort of lived my life. I was like, vacant from role playing for a very, very long time, decades. And I just sort of gotten back into it. And now I see that there's like a 5th edition of Vampire, and I'm sort of standing here wondering what exactly are all the different components to the World of Darkness. And it's not because I want to play any of them, though I did have a good time playing Werewolf the Apocalypse back in the day. And I even had some, good memories of playing Vampire, to be honest. It's not because I want to get back into playing those role-playing games. It's because I want inspiration for creating my own universe based around the game in Nomine. Now, I've done tons and tons of videos on Nomine on this channel, and I'm going to be doing live plays and actual plays in that game. But that world of Nomine is very much like the World of Darkness. And so I really want to sort of pull back, bring in all of Clive Barker's works, bring in Anne Rice's works, and bring in the World of Darkness avenues and sort of setups and scenarios so that I can then create my own version of this fleshed out in Nomine world based around the war between heaven and hell and all the myriad of creatures like vampires and such that exist therein. And so that's why I picked this up, because I was, one, uneducated about what the World of Darkness was, and two, I didn't really understand what the different versions of the game, of the different games in White Wolf Publishing, what they, why there were different versions, what instigated the new versions. I mean, I'm educated in why Dungeons and Dragons changed editions, and that makes sense to me, and it's really based around both game mechanics and new publishers. But White Wolf's versions or editions are not necessarily game mechanic based. And because they're the same publishers and they published ostensibly what they call 4 editions of the game before it was sold off to another publisher who's doing the 5th edition now, I was curious about that. Why were the different editions created? What was the point of those different editions? And what are all the different game like sort of supplements within this world of darkness that I can look into and pull little cherries out of for narrative and story, for my own stuff. So that's what this is all about. This is just a guide for writing products that would then go into the world of darkness and its myriad of different game products. And I'm going to go through each of them now, just so you know all the different game products that were embedded in White Wolf Publishing's version of World of Darkness. This has nothing to do with the 5th edition because I'm totally ignorant about it. I don't know anything about the 5th edition and the new publisher. So it's Vampire the Masquerade, which was the flagship game. Then there was Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wraith the Oblivion, Changeling the Dreaming, Hunter the Reckoning, Demon the Fallen, Mummy the Resurrection, and then a sort of tertiary connection between it all was the World of Darkness Mortals, where each of those different product lines had a component for mortals to exist within. All right, so that's ostensibly the whole setup. And again, the flagship being Vampire the Masquerade had many iterations under its belt. They had Kindred the Ebony Kingdom, which was all about the continent of Africa and the different vampire clans therein. There was Kindred of the East, which was all about Asia, which is massive and has tons of different cultures and stuff. And so it was sort of its own little setting. It had It had Vampire the Dark Ages, which focused not on pre-medieval eras, but it was sort of the height of the medieval era. And then it had the Victorian Age, which of course was the 17th and 18th centuries and leaning into the 19th century. Werewolf the Apocalypse ended up bringing out the Wild West, which is of course the late 18th, early 19th century as well, which would then parallel a little bit with Vampire the Victorian Age. So really that's what the game products and the sort of different game worlds were underneath World of Darkness. And you can see that they really focused on monsters. And this was a horror-based game. And that's important to know because you're not going to have these bright and shiny people. You may have mortals fighting against them, which was the premise of Hunter the Reckoning. But other than that, it was all monster driven. You played a monster and you tried to sort of exist and fight amongst your own kind and other monsters and just sort of live your life. So why the different editions? What was the point of doing a 2nd edition of any of these games and a 3rd edition? And it's important to note that not all of these games had further editions. Some of them stopped at first, like Demon the Fallen. And then some of them, their editions weren't as clear cut. So 1st edition, which was the released edition of all of them, of course they exist. 2nd edition, most of them went into. 3rd edition was called the revised edition. And that was just sort of a mechanic cleanup, game balancing from the game mechanic standpoint. But that really wasn't the point of those games. And then there's the 20th anniversary, which was for most of these games, they got a 20th anniversary edition, which was considered the 4th edition. And the 20th anniversary was basically a rounding out of all the mechanics, including all of the different types of game product lines so that they could work together without having any particular product line being more powerful than the other. So it was a sort of a balancing act that the 4th edition came into. And so the real reason behind each of these different editions was the 1st edition, the sole point was to focus on individual horror. So if you're a vampire, what is it like to be a vampire? Very much that Interview with the Vampire type film and novel experience where you're Louis, for example, and you're discovering what this existence is like, and you're trying to navigate the horror and reconcile your own personal hell of whatever that is. with Werewolf the Apocalypse, again, first edition, it's all about the personal horror. And so it's you focusing on what it's like to be a werewolf. What does that mean? How does your humanity bridge the gap between animal and between Geru and human? Mage the Ascension was very much about opening your eyes to this wider universe that others don't really understand the existence of, that there is magic and that you can control this magic, but it's dangerous and it's untamed. Wraith the Oblivion was this is the one that wasn't as clear for me. And that's where I think the Storyteller's Vault sort of failed a little bit in really nailing down the purpose of each of these different product lines. Wraith the Oblivion is basically, like, my understanding of it, spirits that are trying to come back into reality from the other side. Like, they went to whatever hell or the afterlife or heaven or whatever, and they're human spirits, and they're like leeching back into reality or something like that. I didn't really fully understand it. Changeling the Dreaming was all about folklore creatures like fairies and trolls and stuff like that, right? They're all these sort of fantastical creatures that exist in myth, but they sort of went the way of the dodo, and now they've come back and the entire world has changed. And so they're trying to reconcile that from a personal character standpoint. Hunter the Reckoning is about the personal experience of a mortal coming to the realization that there are, in fact, monsters out there. What does that mean for humanity? Demon the Fallen is about, of course, demons who have inhabited a human body, and they either struggle for redemption or they try to sort of spread their chaos on Earth. Mummy the Resurrection is another really weird one. It's about this reincarnation in the first edition, understanding what it is to be a mummy and stuff. So the first edition product line was very much about individual personal horror. The second edition introduced the meta plot, which is the sort of world events that happen outside and around your personal horror experience. And so it sort of pushes this meta plot for each product line. And, you know, some of them had some connection with others, but mainly they didn't. It was all just each product line had its own meta plot happening. And that was the second edition version of it. Some of the game mechanics altered slightly for balance and stuff because the first edition was just about the individual. It didn't have to deal with balance. Now you have to deal with balance on a larger scale. So that's what the second edition was. The revised edition, also known as the third edition, was the intermixing of meta plots between the product lines and the balancing thereof. Third edition had a lot of game mechanic changes, especially for Mage the Ascension, I believe. But ostensibly, it was about mixing meta plots between each product line to this cohesive World of Darkness experience and progressing that meta plot to whatever the end is, whether it's apocalypse or Gehenna or some sort of clan destruction or something like that. Like, that's really what third edition was about. Fourth edition, which is called the 20th Anniversary Edition, was really the end after that apocalypse, after those end times. How does that meta plot conclude? And then where do you go after that meta plot? That's what that 20th Anniversary Edition product line was all about. And it sort of opened the floodgates. So you're no longer bound by the rules that you had in first edition. Now you can sort of step out of those confined rules. Now that all the game products are balanced together, you can just sort of cross boundaries and have a mixed party of different product line characters and really just experience the World of Darkness as a universe together and in very fun and creative ways. Knowing that, it really helps me as a storyteller sort of decide where I want to pull ideas from. Like, the meta plots of each of these product lines were pretty interesting. And so maybe I want to take a little bit from Vampire the Masquerade. I want to take a little bit from Werewolf the Apocalypse and stuff like that. That's actually helps for creative storytelling. Ultimately, the strength of this product, for me, was how it described each product line. Not only does each edition have its own tone, and it's not overtly focused on game mechanics, but the description of each of these product lines focuses on music. It tells you what type of music for each edition is relevant to the theme of that edition. It gives you examples of literature in both fiction and nonfiction, and then films as well. What's relevant to that, not just product line, but the addition of that product line. And then, of course, it details out the meta plots in broad brushstrokes, which was very, very interesting for me. So that's really the whole purpose and point and culmination of this Storyteller's Guide to the World of Darkness. And what I wanted out of it was to understand what the World of Darkness was and how the product lines fit within it. And that's exactly what it gave me. It gave me a lot of information on how I could then write specific stories tailored to those product lines, or break out and really, hyper focus on the post meta plot storylines and really just stretch my literature fingers creatively however I'd like to. And I really appreciated that. So my favorite parts of this were, and it's just a little splat book about writing. So it's not a heady, review that I'm giving here because there's not really tons of substance to it. But my favorite part was how it really nailed down each product line's addition with the music, with the theme, and with the reference for media, whether it's film or novels. I really loved that because that informed me really well on how I could create a universe within each of these. My least favorite part was that it wasn't as specific as I wanted it to be. It's very much coming from a position of you already know this. You know what these product lines are. And that's not what I was looking for. And again, this isn't the product to tell me I should get the source books for each of those, but I didn't want to buy, what could be like 15 different source books just so I could figure out what each edition was about. I mean, that would be a very expensive way to do it. And so this actually helped me a lot to understand the totality of the World of Darkness in each of these product lines, even if it did lack in the detail that I was looking for. So because of that, it was great. I give it, for what it was, a storytelling guide, I give it 4 evil eyes out of 5 evil eyes. It did what it was supposed to do. I took away an evil eye because it's not exactly what I wanted it to be, and that's just me being selfish. But if you already are aware, if you're already educated about the World of Darkness and the different product lines, then this is going to help you immensely write to those product lines. And so if you're one of those types of gamers, then this would be a definite 5 for you. And it's free, so I highly suggest you would pick it up and read it. And if you just want sort of inspiration, it does a really great job of adding background and context to each of these product lines and additions of product lines. And for me personally, it helped me creatively and it gave me a lot of really great ideas. And I appreciate it for that. All right, so that being said, I got stuff to do today, so I got to make this kind of short. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Definitely check this out if you get an opportunity. If you're a role player or if you just want to learn about the World of Darkness, it's a great source book. It's a great source for that type of information. And as always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live, so get out there and be evil.